what's the big question people have? Like, what's the thing everybody's wondering about? What's the thing I don't understand? What would I want to hear?
It's like, that's Big Darklighter's home. So how did you know? Because I'm a nerd.
Cassie and Jim on the beach, and people are like, no. I can literally hear people that go, no.
Because Darth Vader was the scariest thing that had ever happened to anybody, and this guy literally looks like the devil.
What are you doing, C-3PO? I'm taking one last look at my friends. These aren't your friends.
And I get a later call that said, yeah, you probably want to use Wedge Antilles.
That spirit of doing everything they can to tell the story they want to tell, I think really comes through on Star Wars.
You will get out. There is no try.
I joke that the best thing about writing Princess Leia is everybody knows who she is, and the worst thing about writing Princess Leia is everyone knows who she is.
It doesn't look like they're even hungry when they get out. They're not just like, did you bring a Snickers or something?
I'm honored to be here. I'm also impressed that you got Zach Galifianakis as a guest tonight.
That's so funny.
I've always been kind of a closet Star Wars fan up until, maybe 15, 20 years ago.
I'm just sort of a fan hoping to bring other fans along. That's all I'm doing.
The galaxy isn't growing to push people out. It's growing to let more people come in and find their love so that it's able to continue and create this connective tissue that grows forever.
Where now I feel like I can't do that because somebody's going to turn it into a blog post and then it's going to become a whole thing.
I have had the best time ever on Around the Galaxy.
Coming back to a show that I dearly love and admire, so thanks for having me.
Well, grace, peace, and welcome to Podcast of the Wills, the podcast that treats Star Wars like a sacred text. It's Tuesday night. I keep wanting to say it's Wednesday night, but it's not Wednesday night. It's only Tuesday so far. It's been a heck of a week, as Tina Fey says, or Jack Donaghy says it, and Tina Fey says, no, it's not. I got it wrong. Tina Fey says it's been a heck of a week, and Jack Donaghy goes, Lemon, it's Wednesday. So it's not even Wednesday yet. It's Tuesday, but I love 30 Rock, even though I got the quote wrong. I'm so glad to be here tonight. I'm so glad that I see JD and Jeff and Matthew hanging out in the chat. I appreciate you guys being here for another fun conversation. My guest tonight is going to be familiar to all of you. And he is a returning Podcast of the Wills All-Star. Brandon was actually the third ever guest on the new version. It's like New Coke, I guess. The new version of Podcast of the Wills in February of 2021. So it's been almost 2 years ago that I had a chance to get him on and talk about Star Wars and all the fun stuff. So we're going to go back and revisit a couple of the questions and things that I usually start the interview with, and then we're going to verge into some new territory because he is doing some new and exciting things since the last time I got a chance to talk. Actually, I talked to him at Celebration, but even since then, he's doing more fun and exciting stuff. So without further ado, and while I get my video up so that I can have a clean and tidy transition for, editing and whatnot, I'm excited to welcome back to the show Brandon Wainerdi from Talking Bay 94.
Hello.
There he is.
Look
How
at
are
that.
you?
I'm good, man. These graphics are snazzy. I'm just kind of watching it and enjoying it.
If we can do anything around here in the ATG cast feed between me and Pete, is we're going to try to look professional. Everything that happens after that, we make no guarantees.
There we go. I love it.
It's so good to have you back, and I'm excited that you were willing to return and have another conversation. As I mentioned before we went on the air just a few minutes ago, you were the third ever guest on this new version of Podcast of the Wills in February of 2021. In fact, I think at that point, I hadn't been doing guest cocktails. I had just transitioned the show. I was doing it by myself live on Sunday nights. And very early on, not knowing at all who I was, you're like, sure, I'll come hang out and talk. And that really meant a lot to me because I knew who you were because of Star Wars Twitter and the circles that we run in. But it certainly helped set a good tone for me early on with getting some really fun, engaging guests. And then we've continued to interact through social media. We got to hang out for a few minutes at Celebration. And now here we are. So welcome back. And how are you doing?
Thank you for having me. I was trying to think of what I was doing in February 2021, and I truly cannot remember. But it is really nice to be back and yeah, doing okay. Just hanging out. We just got a dog, and so I had to like I've soundproofed this room, my office. But like this is the ultimate test is
I like it. Well,
tonight.
it's a good way
So
to
if you
try it
hear the
out
yelps,
because
yeah, you know what it is.
Well, I have 4 kids, so it's even more the ultimate
Awesome.
soundproofing test. So, either one of us are headed for chaos at any moment, and that's part of the thrill of this. Well, as we jump into this tonight, before we go any further, I may have some new listeners. I may have some folks, hopefully, that weren't listening back in 2021, 2 years ago. Tell us a little bit, just kind of generally who Brandon is, what you do, and then we'll kind of move from there into Star Wars and your show and some of that.
Oh, geez. Okay. Yes. Yes. I'm Brandon. Star Wars wise, I host Talking Bay 94, which is a Star Wars podcast where I interview cast and crew of Star Wars. Y'all are very familiar with all of that. And then I also am a contributor to Star Wars Insider. I've written for StarWars.com, really exciting stuff. And then my day job, I work for Mondo, which is part of Funko. I do all the marketing and community and events for them. And yeah, I just try to stay busy, which I do. And that is pretty much me. And I also buy a bunch of dumb stuff, which I'm sure we will talk about. I'm sure that's
we are absolutely going to talk about because as the kids say, #goals. You're my collecting idol. Like that's
no. You don't want to say that. You don't want to look at the PayPal statements for the credit card bills and say that.
And since 2021, when you're on, you're also a married man now, which probably has an impact on some of the collecting decisions that may have to be made. There's a lot of finessing and details that go into that.
There is. I will say, Maggie, my wife, has been she's very accommodating of my terrible hobby. And I mean, obviously it's been impacted because I think just me as a person, I have gotten a little more discerning, a little more, specific of what I'm collecting. And I think I've bought maybe the dumbest things that I've ever bought in the past year and a half. So we can of course dive into that, but
that's right.
So far, so
good. Before we get into that, we do want to stick a little bit with Star Wars. I want to talk a little bit more about your show. But before we do that, honestly, because I can't even remember, give us a little bit of your Star Wars origin. When did you find Star Wars? Kind of what were the beginnings of it? How did it hook you? That kind of thing.
Yeah. I this is a hot topic. This is my hot take for your whole show. This is it, which is I think I was born at the perfect time to be a Star Wars fan, which was I was born in 1992, which meant I got to see the special editions in the theaters and it be like an event, right, with the Pepsi cans and all this, and then Phantom Menace came out and the prequels all came out. And then I was able to I was still probably 21 when the sequels came out, right? So the entire time that Star Wars has been coming out and has been new, I've been able to be part of it, right? It hasn't ever gone away. It's always just been there, which is incredible. And so, yeah, I saw the special editions in the theater and that really, I was 5 or 6 and it kind of messed me up forever. That was it. I just liked Star Wars. That was all since then. And then I really kind of started delving in more to the behind the scenes, even very, very early on. And then was reading all the books and going on all the message boards and learning how to use the internet so I could figure out what the script for Revenge of the Sith was going to be and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are. And I kind of, went through college and graduated. And the night that I graduated from grad school was the premiere of The Force Awakens. So then it was like me becoming a quote unquote adult, right? Like me, the real world was like the start of the Disney era of Star Wars. And it's kind of been nonstop since. And, I took the jump. I was inspired by The Last Jedi to kind of be more of a voice within Star Wars rather than consuming it passively. And I think a lot of us have had that same experience of being inspired to be a part of that community. And it's been a really, really wonderful decision. I'm so happy. And I'm very personally proud of making that jump and making these connections and making friends and doing all these things and having it be a part of my life beyond just me buying action figures, right? Like me helping to tell a story, which you do and everyone that's on Star Wars Twitter does. We participate rather than just observe. And I think that's really, really incredible.
Absolutely. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute as well, because I have some thoughts that I want to follow up on. Talking Bay 94 is a phenomenal show. I have been how long have you had? When did you start Talking Bay 94?
When did I? Oh, so I went to the Last Jedi, and I was like, this Last Jedi thing, pretty good, right? And then I was like, I wonder if there are Star Wars podcasts. And I found Blast Points, and I listened to probably 40 hours of Blast Points. So like, I could do a Star Wars podcast. And I messaged my buddy Jason, who's my producer still, and I was like, we should do something. And I figured it all out. And I was like, we should do a Mark Maron kind of Nerdist one-on-one Star Wars podcast. And by the time Solo came out, the day Solo premiered was the day that I was like, here are the first few episodes. We're ready to go. So I don't know. So it was like 4.5 years ago at this point.
Yeah. Well, and I have to say a couple of things. First of all, and I know you hear this a lot, but it is one of the best named Star Wars podcasts there is. Like Talking Bay 94, it's like the first time I saw it, it was one of those like, damn it, why didn't I think of that? Like it's just that good. But also, like I said, I've been listening for a long time, and I think it was in one of your earlier runs, but one of the first episodes that I remember listening to, and part of the reason it speaks to me is because I, like yourself, am a huge nerd for all the behind the scenes stuff, all the production stuff, the making of, like, so much of your show focuses on those creators, puppeteers, set builders. Like, you've talked to so many amazing people. But one of the early episodes that stood out for me, and of course was a hallmark of my teenage Star Wars years, was when you talked to Timothy Zahn. And I think you were actually at a con of some sort. So it was a short, little interview. And the thing that stood out for me, because we now have the Book of Boba Fett that exists in our world, I remember you asked him specifically, one of your questions was, are there any Star Wars stories you wish that you could write or that you would still like to write? And there were two that he told that stood out, and they actually pertain to Book of Boba Fett and the Kenobi show. One of them was Boba Fett trying to get Han back from Cloud City to Jabba and having to deal with a bunch of stuff along the way. And then the other one, and this
War
is
of the Bounty Hunters, right? Like,
exactly, War of the Bounty Hunters. And then the Kenobi idea he had was Obi-Wan going to the other side of the galaxy and essentially faking his death so he could sneak back to Tatooine to watch over Luke. And at that moment, I was just like, why don't we have this story yet? Like, it was just, and again, I've loved Zahn because of the original Thrawn trilogy. That was a big part of my, as you say, Star Wars was always new and exciting from the time you discovered it. I was one of the ones who was born in the 70s and went through the quote unquote dark time. And so it was all about those expanded universe novels, and that, Heir to the Empire trilogy was very formative for me. And I've just always really admired him. So when I found out that you talked to him, I was like laser focused and hook lined in. And that one has always stuck with me, especially in these more modern eras when we've gotten more Boba Fett stories, more Obi-Wan stories. Is there anything from talking to him that stands out? I know you've talked to.
Yeah, he, just like you, he was my, like, it was like Zahn and J.R.R. Tolkien were like my favorite authors, right? And I was like, growing up, I grew up in Dallas, which is a pretty big city, and he never came, like, for 20 years, never came to Dallas, until I went off to college, and then he came twice. And so I was never able to meet him. I never was able to meet him. And then I had this show, and I had kind of reached out to like a bookstore that was in Dallas. I was going to have him later that summer. And I was like, hey, if you need help promoting this signing or whatever, like just like a BS little thing.
That's
and
right.
Like, oh yeah, he'll be at Comic-Con. Let's connect you with Del Rey. And we'll get him to talk to you at the Del Rey booth at San Diego Comic-Con, because I was going to be there for work. And we went back behind the Del Rey booth, and it was just me and my producer Jason and Timothy Zahn and Timothy Zahn's wife, and that was it. It was just us, and we just talked. We had that conversation, and it was the first time I ever got to meet him. It was the first time I ever got to like talk to him, and it became like this really, still one of my favorite conversations, because it was really just kind of a powerful thing for me personally, with this person that I really admired and I really looked up to, and that turned into a great episode. And then I got to interview him later. I had pitched for Star Wars Insider, which we can talk about, but I had pitched an anniversary feature for the Thrawn trilogy.
Sure.
And I got to write that for Insider, interview him again. And I interviewed him the day after the episode with Ahsoka and the magistrate, you know, the Mandalorian, where she says, you know, where's Grand Admiral Thrawn? And so we stop the interview and then we just talk about it for like 15, 20 minutes of him, like, you know, like talking through it and coming to terms with it and being like, what does this mean? Like, what could this do? And it was just like, I was like, this is the best, like, this is the most incredible thing that could ever happen. And so, yeah, I've been very lucky. And, you know, I grew up reading his books and, you know, hiding them under my desk at school and all that stuff, you know, and it was like, this was a really kind of full circle moment.
Well, as we talk about collecting, and we will in a little bit, we went to Asheville, North Carolina over Thanksgiving with my family just to get out of town for a week. And we found a vintage bookstore downtown. And the first thing one of my kids brought me was a first edition hardcover Heir to the Empire that was like $8. And I was like, this is kind of like our friend Scotty J. Rowe. He talks about every time he goes to a thrift store and he sees a DVD of Phantom Menace, like he buys it no matter how many he has. Like if I find copies of the original Thrawn trilogy in stores, like, I feel obligated to buy them. Like,
can I show you
make
something?
a table out of them? Or
I don't want to upstage is the wrong word, because I
by all means,
it's the same thing with the Thrawns. If I see a nice first edition copy, they're I mean, they're rare is the wrong word, but like they're hard to find in nice condition. I always can I show you? I'm gonna
please,
pull my chair. I'm gonna take out my headphones and pull my chair back. Okay,
absolutely.
I bought this on eBay. You know, surprise, surprise. This is a first edition Thrawn trilogy, Heir to the Empire, except it's from Japan, and it's a two-part paperback Japanese Thrawn trilogy. Isn't that cool? Isn't that so cool?
That's so cool.
It's just like so cool. I really, if you look at Japan and you look at all of their releases, their art for this is all the same. But then when you move into like the New Jedi Order, their art is crazy. Like it's like completely custom. And those are the only two I have right now. I have watches on the other ones. But like that's a bad route to take. That's a bad road.
And it could go a lot of different places. And one of the two biggest issues I find with collecting, as we'll talk some more about collecting here in a little bit, it's art and it's books. Like things that I don't have enough wall space to put in frames and put up places. Like I'm looking off to the right of my camera here at like 5 or 6 poster tubes that all have multiple things in them, prints from Celebration, stuff that people have sent me. And of course, as a sucker for like vintage art and Macquarie stuff, like it's just squirreled away. And like I feel like I need those big flat things you see in like poster stores where you can just
I have them underneath
like,
my bed, the flat files.
Gallery flat files. Like it's a whole thing. Well, talking about 94 as we kind of wrap that up, so much good stuff there, so many good interviews. I do have to ask you about one other guest in particular, because again, being the very specific kind of nerd that I am, I believe you got to have a conversation with the wonderful Julian Glover. And if we don't know Julian Glover from Star Wars, we absolutely know him as Marcus Donovan in The Last Crusade. He's also Grandmaster Pycelle in Game of Thrones. Like this is another one of those actors who's like been around my entire life, and I've watched him on screen in all these different roles. Like, what was it like? And I think you're probably like that too, because I know you love Indy the way I do. Like that had to have been another one of those like, oh wow moments to get to talk to Julian Glover.
It was at Celebration in Chicago, and I knew his manager. His manager he got me my first guest. He got me Corey D. Williams and Stephen Costantino. We've kept in touch ever since, and we were at Celebration, and I kind of went up to him and was like, hey, like you have these people that are signing. Is there any way that we could do anybody? And he was like, come at the end of the show and we'll see what we can do. And I came, and it was just me, my producer, and Julian Glover. And it's like 20 minutes, or it's a short interview, but he was so charming. And I cut out so much of it because I was just like kind of freaking out a little bit, right? Obviously, it was Julian Glover, and it's more than Veers. Walter Donovan, right? Being the bad guy of Last Crusade, crazy. And he was so charming, and I really just had a great time with him. But then, let me tell you this.
Yes,
there was that night. I think there was the podcast meetup at Celebration Chicago in the bar, and I had to miss it. I missed the podcast meetup, because the manager was like, do you want to come to the dinner we're having with our clients? It was a pizza place in Chicago. And so it was me and my producer and a few other people. and Anthony Forrest, who played Fixer in the deleted scenes,
Right.
but also the move along Sand Trooper, and
Mhm.
Julian Glover were all eating deep dish pizza in Chicago.
Amazing.
And I'm just like, what's going on, guys?
Where
Like,
am
what's
I right
happening?
now?
Really? I don't think that night can be topped, because I was just like, this is the
That's
craziest thing. But what a guy. Still one of the things I keep almost talking about buying things.
Mhm.
When Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came out, they did all the trading cards. Topps did a bunch of
Right.
trading cards, and he did a bunch of autographs, but so did Julian Glover's wife,
okay.
who played his wife in The Last
Yes.
Crusade.
Correct.
And so when she's like, "Oh, come back to your guests," or whatever it is, right? That's her name is, I think
That's
it's like
her.
Isla Blair, right? And that's her.
Yeah.
And so she signed a bunch of official indie trading cards. I think that's so funny. And they're cheap. They're like $20. I just need to get one. But yeah, I love Julian Glover, and I'm so glad I got to talk to him.
That's fantastic. And again, your show, that's what your show is. Your show is getting to have those moments and getting to talk to so many of these people that even as Star Wars fans, if we don't know them by name, like we know what they've done. We know the people that have worked on these shows and have been puppeteers and have been, like I said, set designers. I forget who it was that you talked to one time, and they're talking about being at Pinewood as a kid because their parent worked in set deck and that kind of stuff too. And they're talking about how they would run around on like the James Bond sets, hanging out, playing while they were waiting for their parent at work. And then they grew up and worked on Star Wars. And like, it's just this, it's a lore and a culture in and of itself to be a part of somebody who works on a Star Wars movie, who works on a Star Wars show. And that's one of the things that I think is so truly charming about your show, is to get those stories, because those people are not spotlight people. They're on the front line. They're the ones making this thing happen for somebody else, but they have an amazing passion for it. And that always comes through when you talk to these people and they get to, almost brag a little bit about the things that they've done and the ways they've contributed to this just truly amazing franchise that we're all so obsessed with.
Yeah, no, it is very nice to be able to give them a spotlight for a moment. And I think the part of my whole philosophy is also, like, I think Star Wars obviously very important, Indiana Jones very important, but examining their career, right, and letting them kind of focus on the whole gist of it, right? Like, hey, what really mattered, I think allows them to like speak more about what's going on, but also like kind of focus in on the important moments in their life and their career. And it's been talking to creative people and being a creative person working in a creative field, it is the ultimate inspiration, as you can attest. Like, it is like the ultimate way to like get fired up and like want to work harder and want to try new things, is by talking to these people that did that and were successful in doing that.
Yeah, it's truly amazing. And so my encouragement to anybody listening to this show is, if you're listening to this show and not Talking Bay 94, first of all, what's wrong with you? But second of all, you should be listening to Talking Bay 94, because the interviews are so great. And again, it's just such a great insight into another side of the Star Wars, universe or galaxy, I guess, that we don't always get to see. So definitely check that out. What I want to do right now, before we get to collecting, because I have all kinds of I'm gonna have to cut us off
forever, man.
I have collecting.
I have a coffee. People that are listening, that they don't see, I have a coffee mug, but that coffee mug does have brown liquid in it, but it is not. It's not coffee.
That's right.
So we're
Brandon
okay.
Brandon understands the show.
I knew what I was getting into. I was like, let's pour a little glass of something and see what's going on.
That's right. I want to talk about journalism a little bit, because you. And I started to make this joke earlier, but last time you were on Podcast of the Wheels, you didn't write for Star Wars Insider, and now you do. So I feel like, you're welcome. I just pushed you along. Just kidding. But no, there's something interesting, and I've had this conversation with a couple of guests recently, and I'd love to get your take on it, which is being a journalist in a fandom that you love so much. And it could be Star Wars, it could be Willow, it could be Indiana Jones. Like, you cover, multiple things, but primarily, of course, for you, Star Wars. First of all, talk just a little bit about being a journalist and covering things that you also love as a fan, because there has to be some challenges there, some tricks there, some insight into, does it affect the way you consume these things that you love on a You loved him before you ever wrote about him or worked for him. I'd love to dig into that for a little bit. So kind of jump into that however you want to.
Yeah. I grew up with reading Star Wars Insider. And so like when we talked, I guess in February, I think my first one came out that summer of 2021, but maybe less, maybe like April. But I had been officially accepted that last summer. So like the end, like August, September of 2020. And so it's like always a very long time coming with all that, which I think when we're talking about it in this sense, and for people that are listening, it is like you work on stuff so far in advance and then you kind of submit it, you forget about it, and then 4 months later it's like, here it is. Oh, okay, I guess I should go buy that at Barnes and Noble or something, right? Like and it has been, I am like, again, we were saying last time we talked, I did not write for Star Wars Insider and I was not married.
Right.
I think those two things are maybe the things I'm the most proud of in my entire life. Because Insider has been incredible. I have a Wikipedia page now, and I'm like, okay. And it has all my articles on it. And so you can see like, here's how many he's written. And like just seeing just that block, I'm like, oh my God, like that is truly insane. But I guess coming from it from like a personal level, I've always worked in fields that I'm passionate about, which like, so for instance, when I was in school, I was at A&M, and then I ended up working for Texas A&M athletics, and I worked there for a long time. And I was, growing up, I was a big fan. You go through these things and you have to separate yourself from yourself as a fan. And you lose a little bit, right? You lose a little bit of like being that fan. Like I'm definitely not as big of an A&M fan than I was going into it all, and like going to game days and suckering in and making sure that everything was working. And the same can be said about Star Wars, where you do lose a little bit, right? You lose the element of being surprised or being a fan or having complete expectations. But I think that trade-off is incredibly worth it, and I think the opportunities are incredible. But I also think that the perspective that you gain about like the people that are making these things, the people that are working so hard on these things, are fans as well, right? Everyone is on that same level, and I think that is almost more powerful than any other perspective. And so I'm very lucky to be able to see both sides of it. And I think hopefully I come across that way where I can just like enjoy something or not enjoy something, or be a fan, but also recognize that like people worked very hard. I think I always say the best example was Rise of Skywalker bonus features, right? I was not a big Rise of Skywalker fan, like it's fine. And then the documentary came out, the Skywalker Legacy, and there was this whole section about how the Sand Snake was puppeteered, right? And it was like great. And then they CG'd it, right? They computer generated over it, and it was just to be a reference for the actors. And initially I was like, what's going on, guys? Like, why would you do this? And then you eventually realize like, no, like everyone that was involved is doing what they love, what they're passionate about, and what they're very good at. And you have to like trust them, and you have to believe in them. And you also have to like respect people's work, because no one is out there like clocking in for their 9 to 5 and being like, let's make Brandon's day terrible. Right? Like no one's doing that. Everyone's doing it because they love Star Wars, or they love what they do. And I think that perspective is incredible. And I think that's important to always, and that's kind of, I mean, again, I can be very critical about Star Wars or anything, story-wise or plot-wise, or how things were presented. But I think once you start delving into the personal, where like this person just is terrible and that's why it's bad, then that's where you're like, I don't know. I think we can take a step back. This guy is getting a 401k. He's getting a paycheck. Like he's just doing his job. And I think that's important for fans across fandoms to recognize and realize.
Well, and I think something else that speaks to the work you do and, coming at it from this kind of fan passion perspective is you, for the most part, like you're not a critic. You don't write articles reviewing things. You write, pieces about an anniversary of, the Thrawn trilogy. You write, it's more fan perspective writing, and there's certainly a passion behind that when you're able to go, holy hell, yes, I want to write a story about Timothy Zahn. Yes, I want to write about, Julian Glover, or whatever the thing is that you're doing. Not that you have to sit down and go, okay, I have to watch Andor, and then I have to give some sort. And there's nothing wrong with critics and critiques, because that's its own cottage thing. Yeah, and it is important. And it's, the ones that do it well are the ones that are able to objectively go, I feel like this worked, I feel like this didn't work. And they couch it in a way that goes, this is how I feel, not if you disagree with me, you're wrong, because art is subjective. And what I like,
and criticism is objective too, right? That's
criticism by its nature. Yeah.
That Rotten Tomatoes score, I think, messed with us, right? By saying, 93%, I'm correct. It's like, no,
no,
it really did mess up how we view criticism, and why. I think a great example is when all these top 10 lists from 2022 came out, and everyone was like, oh, I've never seen these movies.
Right.
Why isn't Black Panther on here? Why isn't? And you're like, no, this is someone's opinion. This is also a way for you to maybe hear about a movie you haven't heard about. Let's try it out. Let's check.
And all you have to do is dig 2 extra minutes to find somebody whose opinion is more like yours, and your movies will be on their list too, because we all have opinions. And those of us that can't stay away from a microphone or Twitter, we're going to put those opinions out there sooner.
Yeah, as two people with podcasts, I think we can't bemoan people's opinions too much, right? Yeah,
that's right. It's got to find that balance. But I do think that I've always thought it's fascinating. And even for something and I'll just give you an example, as we've just finished up with Andor, which I think almost universally we have all just been over the moon for it. When you watch a new something that comes out, assuming you didn't get a screener, assuming it's your first Wednesday, you're popping it on early in the morning, staying up till 2, whatever it is. Do you have do you watch it the first time and take it in? Or, because for me, I tend to watch it the first time, looking for stuff. And then the second time I can kind of release and let go and enjoy it even more. So even a lot of times on a first watch, if I'm not sure, I don't form opinions until the second time, because the first time I've gotten all the surprises out and all the what am I waiting for is out. And then the second time I can kind of take it in more and enjoy it. I think a lot of people are the opposite. How does it work for you when you sit down with something new, knowing that as a content creator, that part of your brain is going to take over at some point?
Yeah. So I have different mechanisms for different types of things.
Yeah.
Right? So for movies, which I'll never get, that's not a screener. That's going in the opening night and just being here we go. Right. I have to see it at least twice that night. I have to see it at 6 p.m. and I have to see it at 10:30 p.m. and just because the first time I don't know what is going on. I am overwhelmed.
Right. Yeah,
Rogue One comes out and you see those things in the corner for the planets. You're like, I don't know any of this. I hate this. What's going on? And then the second time you can figure it out and enjoy it. With movies and TV shows, or with TV shows on Disney Plus, I think is a great example, right? I have this kind of routine now. I wake up pretty early. I wake up at 6 or 7.
Sure.
And I just go downstairs and make a cup of coffee, take a selfie for Twitter, of course, right? You got to. And then I watch it. And then I kind of get on. I have a few people that I follow that I always am like, what do they think? I message a few people. I look on Reddit, see what's going on. What did I miss? And then I watch it again. And I go to work. And I let it sit. And if I really need to do it, I'll watch it again that night while I'm eating dinner or something.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll do about 3 times the first day, a Mando episodes or something like that. Right. And then what I've started to do, this is relatively new, with especially these newer shows, is needing to watch them in the arcs. I think you can watch it week to week and you can understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
But when especially there's a 3-episode arc or a 2-episode arc or whatever it is, or half of a season, it's important just kind of watch it through without any of the week to week, nothing happened this week kind of stuff. And then, yes, as you mentioned, the screeners have been very interesting, where I'm just I don't know how to deal with this at all. I really don't. Yeah. And that's why I never really post here's what I thought, because I'm just watching it kind of in a vacuum, which is crazy. That's a crazy thing to do.
Yeah.
But B, watching it all in a row and just being okay, let's watch new Star Wars is legitimately crazy. I really am not used to that, and so I have to kind of prepare my mind in a different
Mm-hmm.
way and just absorb it.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that about the screeners because that's its own thing. And I haven't had the opportunity yet to be on the screeners list, but like Pete has gotten some of the ones for Andor. And so like even, as podcast partners, like he didn't tell me about it and I had to wait, but like he would come on, like when we did streaming Star Wars on a Friday, he'd be like, I have to remember where the one stopped this week and where the next one happened. Like I have to remember not to say something that hasn't happened yet because I don't want to forget that I've seen it, but not everybody else has. Like,
and especially when you get it early. Andor was crazy. I got it, I think, end of July or something, and it just showed up in my inbox one day when I was working, and I had to text my wife and be like, "Hey, like, you have to come home right now. You have to come home right now because I have to go lock myself up and go wild." But then with how screeners work for people that are listening, your name is plastered over it, right? Like your email address is. And so it doesn't impact it that much, but like watching it again the day it comes out, I've watched everything I've ever gotten a screener for. I've watched the day it's come out, no matter what, just because it's a whole different experience. You're able to see it for real and you're able to engage with everybody. And I think that adds to the elements as well. And again, I think when you observe things in the vacuum, it's not even screeners. It's because I go to a lot of like press screenings or industry events or whatever it is, and when you're watching it in a room of either a half empty room or just industry people, whatever it is, it does impact how you view something. And I think that's very important to how you end up cataloging it overall about like if it was good or bad. And again, like we're talking on Tuesday. Thursday is when I see Avatar 2, right? And like all these people have seen it in press screenings. And it's like, okay, like I'm sure it's great, but like how does it react with the crowd? How does it, like what? And I think that more than anything is what the metric of like a immersive experience could be rather than
and I think that's a really fantastic point because of course one of the conversations that pops up, every second or third month right now in the Star Wars world is we've had this just overwhelming abundance of amazing Star Wars shows of all different kinds. Book of Boba Fett, Mando, Kenobi, Andor. We've got Ahsoka on deck. We've got the Acolyte. Like we've got all these other things coming. And of course the ongoing, Bad Batch. And of course the ongoing conversation is maybe we're okay without movies. And you've heard those people throw that out there. What if, I'd be fine if we didn't ever get a movie, if we keep getting more Andors, if we keep getting more whatever. But I think the key missing piece in that is exactly what you said, which is the communal experience of seeing a Star Wars movie on an opening night. I haven't been to a movie theater to see a Star Wars movie since Rise of Skywalker came out.
Right.
I didn't make it to the Rogue One screenings. I really tried to get to those, but that wouldn't have even been new. It still would have been fun. But when I went with my girls to see Black Panther 2 just a month or so ago, it was that moment that reminded me when they clapped at the end and when we clapped, and cheered at the different things and like having that communal experience, like that is still the thing that movies do for us. Whether, yes, I love the ability to be in my house and like you said, make a coffee, make a drink at night, turn it up as loud as I want, watch it, 4 times in a row by myself. But there is still something to being a theater and everybody losing their mind at the same moment when, the Holdo maneuver happens or when, this other thing collectively, that's a part of it's been in Star Wars DNA from the beginning. Those gasp, oh my God, I'm your father, Grogu reveal moments. And that wasn't a movie one, but like, I think that there's still a need for the movies. And it's that communal experience. And you hit right on that.
Yeah, I mean, because I worked for a movie theater for a while, and I really do love being in a theater, even if there's 5 people in the theater, right? And there's all like I did that last week with Fablemans, and it was just like there's just 5 Spielberg nerds in a room, and just like this is not a spoiler for Fablemans, but there's this story of Spielberg crashing his trains when he was a kid. He was like making movies and crashing trains.
Yes.
And it happens in Fablemans. And the entire crowd of just like 30 to 35-year-old just like dorks are just like, oh my god, like this is like the Avengers coming out. You know what I mean? Like, seeing it on
exactly.
the screen. And it is. I love going to the movies. I'm going to a movie tomorrow. I'm going to a movie on Thursday. I'm going to a movie on Saturday. Like, I love going to the theater, and I also love watching movies at home. But like, I watched Bullet Train on Sunday. I had a good time. I had fun. But would I have rated that movie a star higher if I'd watched it in a theater with no phone and dark and eating popcorn? Probably, right? I probably would have enjoyed it much more. With people laughing. I think a great example going in, I don't know if you've seen it yet, but like Glass Onion, it's coming out on Netflix on Christmas. And I've been able to see it twice in the theater with people reacting and
I'm very jealous of that because that's one of those ones that feels like that moment.
And I think that moment is very important going forward. And I think movies that cater towards that moment is good. But I also think, like, I've seen a bunch of boring is the wrong term, but movies that don't necessarily like go towards just like claps or laughs or whatever it is. But I think that also warrants your attention, warrants your time, warrants the ability to remain focused. I think that almost in this kind of, we're in this very hyper time, right? Where like, my phone is blowing up while we're talking, right? Like, there's noise all around us. And it's like, well, what if I was in a theater with my phone turned off, eating a hot dog and watching a 3.5 hour Seth Green movie? Like, that could be interesting.
Yeah, it could be great.
And that could also impact how I enjoy this movie or not. So I always think theaters are going to be important. I'm very curious of how that goes, but I will always like Rogue One on IMAX was one of the best. A couple Kevin, who listens to my show, was at my screening. I got to meet his daughter, who was like excited to see Rogue One on a big screen. Like, that's crazy, right? Like, that's such a cool thing. And it's a very important part of being a fan is just being surrounded by people that are excited with you, and you don't get that at home. But I think home is great.
It's very America. It's a very Americana pop culture nostalgia kind of thing, and especially for those of us that grew up with that was the only way you got to see movies. I was listening to something the other day, and they were talking about looking up what was on TV in the newspaper, like the TV guide, like back before we had on-screen TV guides. Like I remember I was one of those kids, like the daily newspaper had the TV guide in it. And if I wanted to know what time the Braves game was on, or if I needed to know, when was the A team on, like I had to look it up in the newspaper and follow the little grid. Same thing for the movies. Like I had to call the movie theater and listen to the recording that said what time and what screening, like, okay, Who Framed Roger Rabbit showing at 3:30 on Saturday or whatever it was. It's such a huge part of something that we don't have. And I go back and forth because as a parent, there's also that convenience of like, if I take 4 girls to the movie theater, it's going to cost me $100 and it's going to be this and it's going to be that. And that's when dad mode takes over. And I try to avoid that because again, that experience of just being there, just having that moment, not to get too Nicole Kidman intro to the AMC movies about it, but like, it is an experience. It is something that can feed, especially when you see something new and memorable. If you, saw Last Jedi in the theater and you have the moment with Luke and Kylo on crate at the end, like, the way that movie wraps up with Luke Skywalker, like if I had been by myself, it would have still impacted the crap out of me, but it wouldn't have had the same impact that it did being in a theater and hearing other people react to it.
Right. I'm interested. Now I'm going to turn the questions to you a little bit.
Yeah.
With having kids and with taking them to the movies, or with them even beyond just going to theater, but like them experiencing things, whether it's books or movies or TV shows. What is it? Because I think when you were growing up, and even when I was growing up, like you think about those things in the 80s and the 90s are like kind of like stalwart, like here are the big deals. And is Sing 2 that for the 8-year-olds now? You know what I mean? Like what does it mean for the kids to be able to go and see something or experience something now?
For my kids, it has been what I always describe them as the big rock movies. For them, it's the Marvel movies. Like I have 4 girls, so having kids, like I've got 14-year-old twins. One of them has always been my Star Wars kid, so she and I went and saw Rogue One together in the theater. My other kid, when they were both little, one was obsessed with Han Solo and one was obsessed with Indiana Jones. So win for me. But when our local independent theater did a screening of Raiders years and years and years ago, like she and I went and had a little daddy-daughter date to go see Raiders because she was like, oh, Indiana Jones. But for my kids, like, we don't go to every single, Minions movie and every single, whatever. But like Marvel has been a thing. Like all my girls love Marvel. We did anybody that listens to this show regularly knows that we did a podcast called Heroes of the Mom CU, and me and the 4 girls forced my wife to watch all of the main Marvel movies, starting with, Captain America and going up through Endgame. And we did a podcast episode about each one because she had such little knowledge of Marvel and MCU that she thought that He-Man and Mighty Mouse were a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like she had no idea, no clue. And so it was this fun, like the funny jokey. And, before we watched the movie, we'd show her the poster, ask her what she thought.
Yeah.
And then afterwards we'd watch the movie, we'd come back and we'd record. And she's like, oh, like these are kind of good. So like my girls were super into Marvel. So like that's been their biggest,
that's great,
like draw, And so like when Black Panther 2 was coming out, they're like, we have to go. Like they were on me, Dad, we have to go. Love and Thunder. One of my girls is obsessed with Thor. Like when Love and Thunder came out, like if I didn't take them, I was going to be public enemy number 1. So like these big pop culture things have been the driver for my kids specifically. And I think that could be that way, but again, it's also that culture of like how you grew up. People who grew up going to the movies every weekend probably take their kids to the movie every weekend. Right. I didn't grow up that way. So for me, movies a little bit more event. And like I've reached the point experience. Where for sure. And I've honestly reached the point now where unless it's a big Marvel movie or Star Wars, like I'd love to go see a lot more movies than I do. I just don't have the time to do it. Like it's one of those pick and choose my moments kind of things. But with kids,
sure.
I think to come back, hopefully to answer your question, like, especially with my kids, like it really is, what is their, like, what drives them? Like my youngest or my middle loves horses. And so 2 summers ago, what's that movie called? Is it Spirit the Horse? There's a Spirit horse movie. There was a first one and then there was a second one. And when the Spirit movie came out, she was desperate to go see that movie because she knew it existed. And so I took her to see it at one of our theaters in the summertime. But like it spoke specifically to something she was interested in, not, oh, there's Minions 2 or, oh, there's, Shrek 5 or whatever it was. Like it wasn't just happened to be the movie. It was one that spoke to their interest and desire. That's because kids now, their interests are pulled in a million different places because they do have streaming and literally everything at their fingertips. YouTube, everything at their fingertips. And then as they get older, phones and all that nonsense.
Yeah, that's very interesting because it's like I grew up like I remember learning how to use a computer. I was at that point. And I think, and remembering like buffering a video and like, okay, like let's wait 30 minutes to watch this flash animation, whatever it is. And I think now when they're having to watch and they're having to like decide what's important to them, I think it's very interesting. I think we'll see a lot. I don't know how much you're on TikTok, but I'm on TikTok a bunch. I'm on TikTok a bunch. And I see, especially the people that are probably 5 to 10 years younger than me, how they're interacting with the media when they were 10 years old, right? When I, and it's very, again, I'm fascinated because I think it's nothing bad, but I think it's interesting to see where this is going to go in terms of consumerism and like consuming the actual product of this media.
Without a doubt,
it's crazy.
I do have a TikTok account. I do spend some time there. I have said famously a couple times recently, my bio on TikTok says I'm too old to be on this app and not old enough to be anywhere else. So I'm a limbo guy, but yeah, that's something else. And like you said, I love that idea of, generationally, the way we consume media, the things that we had, like, appointment TV was legitimately a thing. Water cooler TV, where, you're talking about something earlier that you said about like the Star Wars shows and watching them in arcs. That was what it was. You talked about, watching an arc, watching whatever. I spend so much time in my head going back and forth about binge it culture versus glad we get it once a week. Like I love that I get Andor once a week because it gives me time to think about it. Of course, as a podcaster, it gives me time to talk about it.
Right.
But I also know if you gave me all 12 episodes at once, I would watch all 12 episodes right then and there. But when, water cooler TV culture as it was, like I almost feel like that hit a peak with like Lost back when Lost was, significantly a thing. And you had to wait. DVR was on the edge or the curve where you may have been able to record it. But like, if I was listening to, what was it? Maybe it was Smartless with Jason Bateman and Sean Hayes and Will Arnett. And they were talking about, watching an episode of Happy Days when they were a kid. And it was a 2-part, cliffhanger with the Fonz and this whole thing. And he was like, we didn't have a VCR. We didn't have a way to record it. He's like, I had to run to my friend's house and beg him to tell me what happened because the next episode didn't come out for another week. And like, it's so interesting generationally to see what that does. Cause now we have on demand. Like my kids, if they wanted to watch something they missed, they just pull it up and watch it. Like I didn't have that. Like I'm so lucky to have these things that I have, and I still don't fully recognize it.
Right.
Well, I want to shift gears here a little bit because
we've devolved, and I'm so sorry. But
no.
This has been very good. This is very good. Yeah,
this is great. But there's a big topic that I want to get to because it speaks very much to my soul, and you are, for lack of a better description, you are my collecting spirit animal.
Okay.
Because Brandon. If anybody doesn't follow Brandon on Twitter, you should. But Brandon is, for lack of a better description, the don't let me buy this guy. And the amount of times that he posts a picture of an eBay screenshot or some other, obscure auction site or something, and he just says, don't let me buy this. 99% of the time, the things he posts, I'm like, damn, I want to buy that too. I can't, but I want that.
Right.
You, as the don't let me buy that guy, there's a thing, I'm calling this deep collecting. Because it's one thing to buy Black Series figures and pre-order, all the next helmets and all the next things that come out. Some of that's fun. You are kind of a niche collector guy that speaks to me in the same way that you are as a lover of behind the scenes and as a lover of process and a lover of, actually, I know we talked about this when you were on the first time, the beer can that Leia hands up to Luke, cutscene, whatever, like that kind of stuff. Like the first time I saw that as a somebody who loves beer and craft beer, I was like, what is that? I need that. And now you can get them on eBay and they're like $5, and it's right here.
Yeah, it's still behind you.
Indy Coupe double diamond. Like Carrie Fisher.
I'm literally typing it in right now while we're talking, so I can buy this after.
Absolutely. So earlier this week or 2 days ago or whenever it was, you post a picture of a teacup that came from the tea trolley at Elstree. That was a whole and immediately I'm like, and it's because there's a black and white still shot of Han Solo or Harrison Ford behind the scenes holding this teacup while he's talking to Carrie Fisher or whoever it is in the scene. Right. And like me, you look at that stuff and you go, wait, what is that? I need that. You have a Raiders of the Lost Ark hat or ball cap that was
I don't have it.
Oh, you don't have it.
That is the number one thing that I want. That is the number one thing that I want. But continue. That is the only thing that I want right now.
Really, that's the jumping off point for talk to me about this version of collecting that you do and I aspire to, which is deep cuts not even behind the scenes, just like these little key niche kind of things.
I think it's very interesting because I try not to spend too much, that's a bad way to phrase it at the beginning of it because we're about to go into a lot. But I really do love the advances that collecting has made over even the past 10 years, right? With the Black Series figures, with the helmets that you mentioned, right? I have some behind me, really incredible. And really, we're in the best spot we've ever been for collecting, even if I think, Hasbro is whatever, and maybe Clone Wars Hasbro was better. But the things that we're getting is crazy. But what I have started to gravitate towards over the past 5 or 10 years are the things that are a little bit more niche, a little bit more specific, a little bit more collectible is the wrong word. Because I always think about it in the sense of if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, my wife had to sell all this stuff,
Right.
right? Which you
So
don't
he's
make
going to
any
pay more
money
to
off
ship
of
it to somebody
I don't know,
than
right?
somebody's
Yeah,
going
I
to
really
buy it.
don't know. I think if she phrased it correctly, she could. I think she could.
There
make
you
some
go.
money, but I think
It's all about
tough.
marketing.
But yeah, exactly. Thank you. And so I don't know what the best way to describe the way that I buy things, but I think the company that does it the best, and I hope he just clips this out and puts it on his Facebook page, is Tom Spina and
Yes.
Regal Robot. What they're
100%.
doing with what their product they're putting out is how I describe what I care about with Star Wars. Really fantastic, yes, niche, but focused on the auteur, focused on the person that created it, is more important to me than the Black Series figure of Imperial Guard on Ferrix or whatever it is. Like,
yeah,
I think the amount of effort that is put into the detail is fantastic. So, like, the things that I'm buying currently, the things that I post on eBay that don't let me buy this, are all things surrounded by the making of these things rather than the eventual product of these things. And it has brought me so much joy, and it provides me an avenue to like collect a specific product in a specific category without necessarily just going to Target, which, to be frank, I did do on was that Saturday? Like, I think there was a balance, but but you do find things that are interesting, find things that are weird, find things that are not mass produced, and I just love it. I just really love it.
No, and I get it. And there's something really interesting in what you said, because for all the chaos that, you know, for our patrons who get to watch this live when we record, you know, for any time we do streaming Star Wars on a Friday night, the background setup that I have, like, there's a lot going on behind me, but I've gone through these different phases of collecting where, as a kid who grew up in the 80s, it was super easy to go buy a bunch of figures on eBay because they're there, and it just depends on, do you want to pay for them? And so, like, on 2 separate occasions, I've bought a pretty decent amount of vintage Star Wars figures, not great quality, not fully complete, not whatever. And then I've turned around and sold them. And then I also had, when the retro collection came out, I would pre-order those retro figures because, like, these are so cool. It's like my child, like, Black Series doesn't do it for me. Vintage collection doesn't really do it for me. I love the retros because they look like the ones I had. The wall behind me was covered with them in pegs from the first few runs of New Hope and Empire and Jedi, or Jedi's not out yet, but or maybe it is now. But as I would get them and I would put them up on the wall, but once I had them, I realized that it was just the chase of them that I really cared about. Like, once I had them, I really didn't care about those figures. And so I turned around and I sold them on eBay, because for me, much like you, I care about something that's truly vintage. I care about something that's truly unique to a moment. I have, and this is a part where on a visual audio podcast, it gets super visual.
Right, yeah, this is good.
But like the old, you know, the movie projector thing that you hold it up to the light and you crank the handle, and it's got the replaceable cassettes. This one's Assault on the Death Star. Like, I remember that as a kid. I remember wanting that as a kid. Literally in the mail today, because my other obsession besides Star Wars is Indiana Jones. I got these 2 Raiders of the Lost
both
Ark
of those
comic
very
book, and
good.
there's a
I
third
love
one.
that
There's a
cover,
third one that I don't have, but I'm going to be getting soon.
Do you have the magazines? We'll talk about the magazines after this. You have the magazines,
yeah, we're gonna have to get to the magazine. I don't,
Yeah.
but it again. There's a whole pile of things there. But that's it for me. Like, it becomes, what do I truly care about? Like the Ralph McQuarrie prints that came in those 80s packs that were, you know, 21 prints. Like, I've got some of those framed on my wall. I've got the other ones in a folder because I don't have enough places to put them. You know, the posters that I have behind me are from it. Actually, there was a southeastern regional chain called Burger Chef, which was different than Burger King, but they had the same artwork that were on the Burger King glasses. So I have the Burger Chef posters, like from, you know, the 70s and 80s. Like, it becomes that thing where I go, I love that because it was from my time period. I love that it was not just a Black, and no offense to the Black Series people, because I know y'all love that stuff. And my Stormtrooper helmet is Black Series. When they do a Black Series Biker Scout, because Return of the Jedi 40th is coming, I will buy that because that's the one helmet I need in my life. But like, I had the Boba Fett, I had the Darth Vader, and it brought me joy for a minute, and then I sold it because I was like, I don't care about this as much as I care about the teacup, like the teacup that you posted. Like I spent a significant amount of time yesterday trying to find one because I'm going, there's a story there and there's a connecting point where I can print out that photograph and go, look, this is the same cup as that to me. And again, that's what collecting is. It's as individualized as our taste in shows, movies, the media that we consume. But you have always been one of those ones that as I follow and I watch your posts, I'm like, that's a good one. He knows what he's doing. Like it's awesome.
I appreciate that because it is part of me. I don't know how to maybe we can figure out here. Like I don't know how to describe it of that mentality of collecting. And I remember when we talked 2 years ago, seeing your background. I think you had your Chewbacca prop store thing too. It was like,
let's go back there somewhere. Actually, no, he's over to my right. But
let's be specific about what we're collecting. That's
it.
Let's be very specific is the wrong word, but let's be very intentional about what we're collecting about Star Wars and what makes us love Star Wars rather than just like, let's collect every single action figure there is. Let's collect every single whatever it is. And I think that brings you closer to the thing that you find joy in. And I think you're doing a great job with that. I'm trying to do that. And it's just like, again, I think coming from the Blast Points school, what's his name? Mike Leach just passed away, who incredible football coach and had a distinct voice. And his they call it when you're a coach and you have coaches that coached under you, right? It's like your school,
your coaching
right?
grade.
It's your family. It's your it's who you've mentored, who you've brought up. And this Blast Points idea of being your authentic self by being what you gravitate towards in Star Wars and how that's how you collect, I think is so is so meaningful. And I think that has been a driving force with like how I buy things. And if you're willing, I can show you things. I can show off right now. I'm ready to show you stuff because it's just like, what's the dumb stuff that like brings you joy that not necessarily you've bought at a Walmart? Which
all right. So here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna ask you a couple questions, and that's right. We're gonna ask you a couple questions, and we'll be as descriptive as we can, knowing we're gonna put this out as an audio version.
Yeah.
I did actually jot down a couple of questions. One of them was Holy Grail, but I think you've already hit on that. It's the Raiders hat.
It is. That is correct. I have a couple other ones. If you really want to ask it again, I have a couple other ones because someone just
absolutely.
Asked me
So let's start there. What are some of your Holy Grail finds that you would love to hit on that kind of fall in this category that we're talking about?
Okay, so in terms of finds, something that I've not found yet, and that I just turned 30, which is young, but I just turned 30. I was like, you know what a nice gift would be like for myself. I would buy myself a Raiders crew cap, right? The beige mesh Raiders crew cap. And I've been putting in all the groups I'm in, and no one will sell one, which is frustrating because like 5 years ago, they were like $400
everywhere.
Now they're like $3,000, right? Like it is.
Well, if it helps, because I've also searched for these. If it helps, my Amazon populates the fake version that you can get.
I hate the fake version, man. I get so bad. I get it all the time. And part of me is like, oh, that'd be fun to wear around. I have too many hats. I just want the real one. I do have my other. I've gotten 2 of my 3 Grail hats though.
Okay.
And we're an audio podcast, so I'm not gonna like.
That's right.
I wonder if I could just like, there's my Salacious Crumb clock. You can see in the background. You can see my Jedi hat, the corduroy hat that George Lucas wears in the behind-the-scenes photos.
Correct.
And you can see the Yoda hat that George Lucas wears in the behind-the-scenes photos. Yes. And those were my 2 Grails for a long time, and I got them. And I spent a little too much on them, but I got them. So I feel like Raiders is the next step, and I'll replace, like we were talking about Black Series helmets. I have the Black Series Proto Fett helmet, which I think is incredible. Eventually, I'll get Dwayne Dunham to sign it, but really, really feeling good about that. So yeah, Raiders crew cap, top of the list. The other weird ones, I'll tell you a couple weird ones. In the 1970s, I think it was like 1978, George Lucas got all this money from Star Wars, right? He was like, what do I spend this money on? And he got a small ownership stake in a New York comic store called Super Snipe. And Super Snipe had the first gallery of Star Wars art in 1978, featuring Joe Johnston and Ralph McQuarrie art. And there are incredible prints of Joe Johnston and Ralph McQuarrie, like the X-Wing and TIE Fighter and Death Star, all that stuff comes from Super Snipe. And so I really want some Super Snipe prints. And that's really high up there. That's my watch. And the other thing that I really want right now, there's one on eBay that is not my size. I'm a little bit of a bulky boy. The VistaVision shirts that the ILM crew is wearing. I really want one of those, and I would really love a holiday special animation cell, which they have a couple of on eBay, but it's of the general with his orange mustache. I would rather anything else.
Something a little more specific.
But that is my current holy grails. If that answers your question,
that totally works. What are, and I know you've got some fun stuff that you have found. What is your favorite story with one of your kind of niche finds, with one of these things that you found?
Can I? I've never told the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
Okay, let me grab.
Yep. Do it.
This. Have you heard of? You've seen the Rumpf mug.
Absolutely.
You've seen the Rumpf Chewbacca mug. Really, I've wanted one of these for such a long time, and I finally ordered one on eBay. I spent a little too much on it. They probably go for $150. I probably spent $200, $250 on it. But this one was given by George and Marcia Lucas to the Lucasfilm and ILM staff in 1978 for Christmas as their Christmas gift. And so I got this one with the tags from Marcia and George saying Merry Christmas. And then I got a letter from the ILM employee who received this saying, this is what I got from Marcia and George for Christmas.
Absolutely amazing.
And I have that all stowed away. And it really is like, I'm like, I've taken a break for this month for talking today, but I'm going to reach out to this guy in the new year and be like, hey, I would love to interview
you. Got to come talk about this.
I have your mug. Like, let's talk.
Exactly.
I think that's so cool.
We have to make this happen.
So yeah, that's my, if you asked me that question a month ago, who knows what that answer, but I just got this like a couple weeks ago, and I am just amped right now.
It's so good. And I think, did you post a picture of the letter? I think you.
It was a little tag from George and Marcia, and it is, me and Marcia, that's like my weird thing. But I'm so glad that I have that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic one. So I guess it's hard to ask what is your best find, because there's so many great things. It's hard to, I don't know if I can pin you into a favorite child category.
No, that's tough.
Because you have found so many things. Give me a couple of your favorites to this point, and that doesn't mean that it's not the mug.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'm looking around the room for the people that are listening, or for the benefit of the people that are listening to this podcast. I'm looking around the room. We're trying to figure out what's going on. I'll show you. This is my best find in terms of. This is $40. This was $40. I was at a Half Price Books in Dallas, Texas. It's right next to me right now. It's this framed Time magazine. Magazine, right? It was $75 as is. I still have the tag on it because I'm very proud of it. But it was 40% off day at Half Price Books. And I saw it, I got them to take it out of the case, and I ran away with it after they paid for it. And it's a beautiful, beautiful Time magazine, but it is signed by George Lucas. I don't know if I can. I'm trying to figure out the way to show this. It's signed by George. It's dedicated.
There it is. Yeah.
I think it's dedicated
to
Bob.
Amazing.
You could tell me if it's dedicated to someone else. Dedicated to Bob. It says, "May the Force be with you," George Lucas, in his vintage signature. And
Time magazine, and it says George Lucas, Star Wars 3, Return of the Jedi.
So good. Signed by George. And I got it for $40 in Dallas, Texas, Half Price Books. And I was like, this is the best day of my life. Do I change my name legally to Bob? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
it's worth it. It's totally worth it.
And so that, I think, was probably one of my best. I'm looking around now. I don't know what else to to do. Okay, I'll tell you a story. You want me to tell you a story?
Yes, please.
You mentioned earlier the "Don't let me buy this" of it all.
Yep.
Right. I tweet "Don't let me buy this," and I'll tell you a secret, which I tell sometimes. But if I tweet "Don't let me buy this," 99% of the time, it is something that I know already I'm not going to buy. Right. I'm not going to tweet "Don't let me buy this" as something that I'm trying to bid on because I made a mistake one time.
You got outbid.
And I got outbid immediately. I tweeted it and I got outbid immediately.
Yep.
And then 3 years later, it popped up again and I bought it. And it's on my wall. You can see this original Star Wars sticker. It's above the sticker. Now let me move my camera and I'll show you. Let's see if I can do it. It's this Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular pennant.
Amazing.
In incredible condition. I got it framed, but that was what I got outbid on. And I was like, never again. And then when that came back on eBay, I was like, let me make sure that I get it this time.
Absolutely.
And that's
lesson
my secret.
Learned.
I like that. It's not something I actually want. So.
That's right. All right. So we've covered a bunch of ground tonight. We've talked about where you started. We've talked about the work you do. We've talked about collecting. We could talk for 4 more hours about collecting, and we might when we get off air. But that's a different thing. What I want to wrap up with, because one of the things that we talk about on the ATG Cast Network is it begins and ends with Star Wars. We start with Star Wars. We may go somewhere else in the middle, and we come back to Star Wars at the end. One of the questions that I like to ask on Podcast of the Wheels, as I say, this podcast that treats Star Wars like a sacred text. I love to ask my guests, can you put your finger on a time when you have had a Star Wars spiritual experience? And really, for me, I couch that as a time when Star Wars hit you on a deeper level. Now, for you, it could be getting to write for Insider. For you, it could be getting this one collectible that has haunted you your whole life. It could be a movie, a moment. It's literally anything, but it's that time where Star Wars was more to you than just a movie or just an entertainment property. Can you, Brandon, for us, tell us about your Star Wars spiritual experience?
We met Celebration. Celebration is just the best. Like it, that being an experience, that being an opportunity for people to come together is fantastic. And this last Celebration, I brought my wife. She was like, if you're going for a week to Celebration, you have to take me. I was like, okay, sure.
Yep.
And so I took her, I brought her, and I was like, just take it easy. Like I had a panel, and I was like, just take it easy. Just all you have to do is come to the panel. If you want to go to Disney, you can. If you're going to go eat or shop, whatever you want, just do what you want to do. And then the morning of the first day, with the opening ceremonies, with that first Lucasfilm panel, we got in. And I was like, if you come right now, I can get you in right now. I can get at this very moment, I can get you as she came. And experiencing with her the opening of the Lucasfilm panel, which was the Duel of the Fates, sung by a live orchestra, and then Ewan and Hayden coming out, and then it just built and built and built, right? And she was like, "Oh, this is why you like this!" Like she was so excited.
Exactly.
It made me so happy. And then I think she was feeling great, and I was like, "Yeah, of course! Like this is what Celebration is." And then that combined with then John Williams coming out and playing Raiders, the Raiders March, and then Harrison coming out. That was then when I had a terrible time because that was me. It was me and my wife, and then the Blast Points guys sitting next to me, and Harrison comes out, and I think there's a video of me somewhere. Harrison comes out. I stand up, I scream. And then I almost just like pass out. I'm on the upper deck of this convention center. I almost topple over. I almost topple over multiple flights of whatever because Harrison Ford is there in person. And that I think was the moment that I've been the most overcome with just like Star Wars mania. And yeah, I think that's the moment combined with my wife experiencing it and then me seeing Harrison, John Williams being there, me being around friends. I think really that cannot be topped. I really don't know of a time that can be topped.
I agree with you completely. And for me, for a long time, I said my answer to that was Celebration Orlando. I went just for one day, drove down with a buddy of mine. We literally road tripped it from Alabama to Orlando, did one day, and I was there. It was right after Carrie had died. And I was there when Billy Lord came out on the screen, out on the stage, and did the monologue from New Hope. Did Carrie's monologue, General Kenobi years ago. You served my father in the club, and like standing in this crowd of people, watching this woman who'd recently lost her mother recite this iconic thing. Like I felt tiny, like minuscule, like it was such a huge like community moment. And then for me to translate that forward to Celebration this year, because I didn't get to go to Chicago, to go and not only take in all 4 days and have the full experience, but to have the context of being in the content creating community and getting to meet. I mean, it was a family reunion. I mean, I met you, I was with Pete, and you were sitting there talking to David Whitley, and y'all were right there in the middle of the convention hall. And we walked by and we stopped and we chatted. And it was one of these just like wild, holy cow, like I'm here with all these people that I've gotten to be friends with. And same thing, being in that Lucasfilm panel, Harrison Ford came out. So I love that yours revolves around not only Star Wars, but the communal ability to experience Star Wars. Like that's truly powerful.
One second, my AirPods have disconnected, but I was gonna let you finish your
That's
beautiful.
amazing.
One second.
That's okay.
I don't wanna
Small
ruin
technical
this. I'm gonna
difficulty.
ruin
We're going to edit this out. It's fine.
This is why editing exists, right? The people that are live get to experience this. They get
Yeah,
to
you're all
really-
welcome. Everybody else, you don't get to hear this.
That's so weird. Okay, I'm just gonna. You can still hear
That's all right.
me, right?
Yeah, you're
You
good.
can still
I can hear
but
you.
I'm just gonna take off my
Yeah.
headphones. Okay, cool.
Yes.
Love it. Yeah, it's great. A celebration, just a wonderful, wonderful place.
The communal celebration of Star Wars, the communal aspect of celebration, I guess I should say, it was way more powerful this time than it was in Orlando in 2017 because I got to see these people, meet these people, and connect with people that I had become really close friends with, whether it was Scotty and Jerry from Bombad, Pete, my partner, you know, you, literally anybody. I'm literally sitting here on my desk. I have my Talking Bay 94 highlighter that I got.
There we go. I
Celebration.
have those too, right? Yeah, you gotta represent. You gotta
Exactly. You know, you do what you do, but that's what Star Wars is, and it goes back to what we talked about earlier in the show with TV shows versus movies. Like Star Wars is built around a communal experience. We see those pictures from the Chinese theater in 1977 and people stacked up, lined around the block. Like that was a communal experience. That was a chance for people to be together and enjoy Star Wars. So your moment speaks to that. My moment reflects that. And honestly, as podcasters ourselves, like that's what we hope this is. We hope that we put out our respective shows to people who get to experience it and, you know, maybe find something they enjoy that they share with somebody else. So truly a powerful moment. I really thank you for sharing that because it reflects, again, a lot of who I am and I think what I feel for my stuff, but it also shows through in the way that you do your show, the way that you exist in our fan community and the things that we do. So thank you so much for sharing that for sure.
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. It's again, the fan community is almost more important to me than the actual Star Wars of it all, right? Like you have to think like the people that you've met, the friends that you've made, the family that you've made. I talk to people every day from the people that I've met on Star Wars Twitter or Star Wars podcasts. Right? That's crazy.
Same.
And that's so cool. And you know, the George Lucas of it all, the Kathleen Kennedy, all this stuff is almost minuscule compared to the relationships that you can build and the personal friendships you can make and the growth that you can have as a person based on liking something or loving something or, or interacting with something.
Yeah, it's truly phenomenal and I couldn't be more thankful for it. And speaking of thankful, I'm thankful for you. I'm thankful for this chance to hang out and talk tonight. I do want to get us out of here because we want to have this not be like a full 2-hour episode.
I'm here, man.
But before we get you out of here, tell everybody what you've got coming up. Plug anything, whether it's Insider, Talking Bay, whatever you've got coming up. Let us know.
What do I have coming up? I have a couple cool interviews for Talking Bay coming up that will be published in early 23. Insider, I have a few things coming up. I have normally with Insider I do interviews, right? I just do interviews. They had me do a Bad Batch recap, so I have a Bad Batch recap coming out, which is very cool. And then a few pretty cool interviews. What I love to do is like oral histories, sort of different species or different characters, or different, if it's Jabba the Hutt or if it's Salacious Crumb, and I have an Ewoks one coming out, which is very cool. And so all of that's coming very soon. And then, Mondo, just please follow us and see what we're doing right now. I think it might be too late. The people that are listening live for the Patreon, they get the exclusive right now thing, which is right now we're doing a Star Wars timed edition poster for Kenobi, which ends on this Friday, I think 15th, which is very, very cool. 2 mini prints of Vader and Kenobi that I will have framed on my wall as soon as they are printed. But we'll have many more of those coming up, and that's pretty much it. That's all I got. I want to enjoy your end of the year and your holidays, but that's all that's going on my end.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being a part of this. Thank you to everybody who is listening to our episode, and may the Force be with you always.
May the Force be with you.
Just one more round, friend, then homeward bound, friend. Don't forget me in your dreams. Just one more song, friend, and then so long, friend. The nights get shorter, it seems. Just one more rhyme, friend. Yes, it's a crime, friend. But you know time, friend. Time can fly. So it's good night, friend. Good night, but not goodbye.